some of you guys, many of you guys know, we just came back from the retreat, and so I didn't get much sleep at the retreat, and so I was pretty tired last night. But as I was kind of vegging out last night, and turned on the TV, and obviously the Olympics is on, and it just caught my attention that as I was kind of looking at it, they said, "Oh, it is Michael Phelps' last swimming event," and so there was like this relay thing, and I was like, "Oh my goodness!" And Michael Phelps, he's been, I mean, I think I've seen him since like 2004, 2008 that time, and so he's the most decorated Olympic athlete of all time, and so he was going for 23rd gold medal, right, in swimming, and that's just mind-boggling, right? To just for most people, just winning just one gold in Olympics is their dream, and I've seen some people who are getting like silver or bronze, and they were getting so excited that they were representing their country, and then just winning a medal, right? And so for most people, even just representing their country is such a huge honor. And here is Michael Phelps. He's a class on of his own, and he was going for his 23rd gold medal. It was a team event for sure, but he really did his part. And so they, for the very last race of his illustrious career, again he wins the gold along with his teammates. And so he was getting really emotional, and so with all this adoration and accolades that are just heaped on him, and at one time I had a chance to look at his training video thing, and it was just amazing how much effort and time that he puts into swimming. You would think that because he's such a just accomplished swimmer that he could just kind of just train. He doesn't have to train much, and then gold medal is pretty much like reserved for him. It is nothing like that at all. And so I've seen the training video, and he puts in so much. He just literally pours out his heart in training. And I don't know if you guys have been following the 4 years ago at London Olympics, he didn't really do too well. And because after the Beijing Olympics in 2008, he won so many golds, and all this spotlight was on him. He was like the superstar. And it kind of totally slacked off. And so he was not properly, he didn't really train properly. And then so there was pretty embarrassing results for him in London Olympics. Some of them, he didn't even make it to the medal, he didn't make it to medal stand. And so he got so embarrassed. And so he said that in one of the interviews, I'm just going to dedicate my life, right, to this, the Rio Olympics. And so that's what happened. And so because of through his dedication and just undivided just commitment to his sport, that he won 23 gold. Right? That's just an amazing thing. And the reason why I'm talking to you about that is this unswerving dedication usually makes a lot of things happen. And then so as the saying goes, what we do in darkness will be coming out, and it will be shown in the light. And I think nothing much really changes when it comes to spiritual matters. What separates one from another, it's not so much of his or her gender or education, race, age, or anything like this. We may think that some of the spiritual giants that we look up to were born that way. Billy Graham, or all these other great people that we may admire, that they were born that way, or they were predisposed to be great from the beginning, that God somehow just picked them and said, you know what, I'm just gonna use you really greatly. So from the get-go, early on, that they're just predestined to be just great spiritual giants. It's nothing like that. The only difference that really sets people that we really admire is their extraordinary devotion to Christ. There's this man named C.T. Studd, famously quoted, if Jesus Christ be God and died for me, then no sacrifice can be too great for me to make for him. If Jesus Christ be God and died for me, he's the one who, though he's the Son of God, but he died for me, then no sacrifice on my part can be too great for me to make for him. And the passage that we read here this morning, this is a message to the generation that Joshua has led all this time. And I just want us to take this time machine and go back to that moment as Joshua is making this farewell speech to his people. And at the end of his life, after all the battles and conquests in the land of promise, the promised land, Joshua summons all the people that he has led all these years. It is pretty much the last exhortation from an amazing and great leader who succeeded Moses nonetheless. And if you are one of them following his leadership, you would think, you really fought for him and you fought with him. You've been through all the ups and downs of the conquest. As we read, if you get a chance to read through the book of Joshua, there's just some amazing victories, but also there were some really demoralizing defeats because of their disobedience, humiliating due to their disobedience. And so you have gone through you have lived all these moments of all the ups and downs. And the next thing you know, Joshua, your leader, is pretty old. He's an old man, a grandfather. When he first led the Israelites into the promised land, he was this really energetic man, this young man. But now, after all these years, he's very old. And in this farewell speech is the message that I think we need to really just give our attention to. So you put yourself in the shoes of a hearer of this message. And the theme of his message here is a call for loyalty and dedication to the Lord because of all that Christ or God has done for him and through him. And so the first thing the main thing that he talks about is remember God's faithfulness. So just put yourself as one of those people hearing his last speech. It says, remember God's faithfulness. Joshua here wastes no time in reminding people of how faithful the Lord has been. In verse 3, it says, and you have seen all that the Lord your God has done to all these nations for your sake. For it is the Lord your God who has fought for you. Behold, I have allotted to you as an inheritance for your tribes those nations that remain, along with all the nations that I have already cut off, from the Jordan to the great city in the west. The Lord your God will push them back before you and drive them out of your sight, and you shall possess their land, just as the Lord your God promised you. That it is the Lord who has fought for us. Yes, even though it was really the Israelites that have fought the battles, ultimately it was the Lord who fought for them. We didn't get to read, but chapter 24, verse 12, it says this. And I sent I have that. Okay, so, and I sent the hornet before you, which drew them out before you, the two kings of the Amorites. It was not by your sword or by your bow. I gave you a land on which you had not labored, and cities that you had not built, and you dwell in them. You eat the fruit of vineyards and olive orchards that you did not plant. That God is reminding them, even though it was really a lot of times, it was the Israelites who just went out there to do the battle, but God is reminding them, ultimately, it was God who brought them victory through different means. I was fighting for you. I was walking with you. I was going before you so that the results may be secured. And as it was back then, it is also true for us. It is really the Lord who comes, who fights for us. He's there, walks alongside of us, and at times he opens the doors for us to enter through. It is the Lord who has provided everything for us, including victory over sin and salvation. I mean, who among us can claim that by our works? Who among us can say, you know what, I have overcome the sin. You know, I tried so hard. I disciplined myself, and I did this and I did that. I just put all the safeguards all around me. That's how I overcame sin. I did my job. I did well. It was all through my sheer willpower. And I earned my salvation. I am good enough because I lived a good life. That now I can stand before God and say, God, look at my life. Look what I have done. I've done really all these great things for you. So now I deserve to get into your kingdom. You know, at the retreat, the very last message that the speaker talked about, one of the things, the dangers that we need to really watch out for as Christians was the sense of entitlement. Oftentimes, we think we deserve a lot of things. And especially living in this country, there's a lot of entitlements. So we kind of grow up with a sense of entitlement. And so when things do not go our way, oftentimes we blame God. God, how could you do this to me? I've worked so hard for this promotion. How come I'm not getting the promotion that I deserve? How come I'm not getting the recognition that I deserve? How come I'm not getting the person that I deserve for marriage? And all these different things. Somehow we develop this sense of entitlement. So we bring that into even in our relationship with God too. God, because I am coming out to church regularly, or I am tithing, or I am serving, shouldn't you really just do good things for me? I scratch your back, now it's your turn to scratch my back. You do things for me. Oftentimes we look at God as some kind of vending machine. We put in the quarter, or we put in the dollar, and out comes the drink that we want. And when we don't get it, say, what's going on? You owe it to me. But God is reminding us through Joshua that it is really God who has done all these good things. And even for us, in terms of our salvation, that God has been there. He has done all the things for us. It is done for us. The only thing we can do is to simply acknowledge what Christ has accomplished for us on the cross, and then give him credit, and to acknowledge it with humility. We may give ourselves credit for a lot of things, but it is really the Lord who has done all this. Because he has been faithful to us, we are where we are. We are who we are because of his faithfulness to the covenant that he has made with us through his Son, Jesus Christ. Every blessing, every good gift does come from the Lord. So the first thing that Joshua, for his last speech, maybe he thought about what he was going to say, and the first thing that he reminds his people before he departs is to remember the faithfulness of our God. That when we go through hardships, when we feel like we're at the break point, when we feel like we reach the point of just giving up, throwing in the towel, Joshua is reminding us not to give up, but to first remember the faithfulness of our God. That God has been faithful to each and every one of us at every turn, at every moment. Even in those times when we felt like we were all alone, that God wasn't really there for us, that it was really the Lord who has carried us through. As we know all too well from the story of the set of footprints, right? We all know the story. When, as in one day in a dream, you were just walking along the beach, and you were walking with the Lord. But then as you look back, you realize that the toughest moments of your life, that you only you see one set of footprints, right? So you're a little baffled and a little really discouraged. Lord, why in those tough moments that I see only one set of footprints? Where were you, right? When I needed you the most, when I was in desperate need of your presence and your guidance and your encouragement, where were you? How come I only see the one set of footprints? And that's when the Lord, turns to you and say, that footprint that you see was mine. I'm the one who carried you when you couldn't go anymore. That in those difficult moments of our lives, it is really God who is carrying us and just pulling us, cheering for us, opening doors for us. So first thing that he says is remember God's faithfulness. And the second thing is, but that's not the end of the story. So be very strong. That's not the end of the story. As much as we are to remember and rejoice in God and celebrate his goodness in our lives in the past, but that's not the end of the story, because there are so many more things that are coming our way. Even for Joshua and the Israelites, there were still other nations in the promised land. Even though they conquer a lot of nations that are there, but not every tribe and nation was driven out completely. So as good as the faithful as God has been, but since that's not the end of the story, there's still more. And if we compromise, there will become snares and traps for us. In verse 7, it says, that you may not mix with these nations remaining among you, or make mention of the names of their gods, or swear by them, or serve them, or bow down to them. But you shall cling to the Lord your God, just as you have done to this day. For the Lord has driven out before you great and strong nations, and as for you, no man has been able to stand before you to this day. And so he's saying, hey, do not compromise. And now there's peace among us, so let's forget about other nations. We're just kind of, as long as we have our own land, that's fine. We're just fine with it. I'm happy with this. It's just like kind of the remaining sin in our lives. Yes, we have won the victory, or Christ has won the victory for us. And now we have the power and the authority to overcome sin. But you see, there's still sin that remains in our lives. So we need to be strong. We don't live in the past. We need to continue to just look forward. And there are other challenges that are going to come our way. So that's not the end. We don't simply say, well, Christ has won the victory, so now life is good. No, it's not. So we need to be very strong. And that's what Joshua was telling his people. The last thing that he says is fear the Lord and serve him with all faithfulness. Right? And you choose what you are going to do. Right? Joshua chapter 24, 14 and 15, it says this. Now therefore fear the Lord and serve him in sincerity and in faithfulness. Put away the gods that your fathers served before the river and in Egypt, and serve the Lord. And if it is evil in your eyes to serve the Lord, choose this day whom you will serve, whether the gods your fathers served in the region beyond the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land that you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. You would think that after all that they had gone through together, under the strong leadership of Joshua, that there would not be any idol worship. But no, there was. And so it says, hey, choose for yourself whom you're going to choose. You choose who you're going to serve. I read this article a while ago. But this is a story about Meryl Streep. So in the December of 1987, Life magazine, the writer wrote this: Meryl Streep is gray with coal in Ironweed, her new movie. She plays as a ragged person who dies in a cheap hotel room. And for more than half an hour before the scene, she had been hugging a huge bag of ice cubes in an agonizing effort to experience how it feels to be a corpse. Now the camera begins to turn. Jack Nicholson, her lover, sobs and screams and shakes her body. But through take after take, and between the takes too, Meryl just lies like an iced mackerel. Frightened, a member of the crew whispers to the director, what's going on? She's not breathing. That gives her a start. Gives a start. In Meryl's body, there is absolutely no sign of life. He hesitates, then lets the scene proceed. Yet even after the shot is made and set struck, Meryl continues to lie there, gray and still. Only after 10 minutes have passed does she slowly emerge from the coma-like state into which she has deliberately sunk. And so the director is amazed. Now that, he mutters in amazement, is acting. That is an actress. His total dedication really impresses and amazes people. And how wonderful to be so dedicated, to be Christ, that people may say, wow, that or he or she is a Christian. And sometimes we need to really ask ourselves, as Joshua is asking his people, where does our allegiance really lie? There are so many competing sources that are just trying to grab our attention. And oftentimes God is drowned out by all these things that are just clamoring for our loyalty and allegiance. So this message that Joshua gave to his people is also really a message to all of us. That it would be a tragedy when one generation makes sacrifices to follow God and the next generation comes along and loses the heart for God. Obviously, this text is in the context of Joshua at the end of his life, addressing not his own generation who wandered in the desert for 40 years, but rather the next generation of people after him that's going to continue living in the promised land. He's pleading with them. His concern was that people would depart from the Lord and lose their inheritance. Who knows? We may be that generation from our parents' generation or for the next generation after us. After all that they have done, that we just receive a lot of good things through the sweat and blood. And then we just take it easy in our own lives and go after other gods, idols, give our hearts to other things. For this generation, it could be the materialism, it could be success, continuing up on the corporate ladder, just taking our life easy, achieving our American dreams. All these things can be those factors, other idols in our lives. So Joshua was challenging it, just as he was challenging the next generation of people of his day. We can also take this to mean for us as well. Who are we going to serve in our lives? What are we going to do? Who are we going to choose, self or God? And he's saying, you choose. You choose who you are going to serve. So it is my prayer for us that as we give our attention to what he has to say, that we could also just come before him and say, God, here I am. I am here to serve you as you have been so faithful to us all these years. I choose this day to serve you wholeheartedly. Let's go before the Lord and just take a moment to pray.